Welcome back again to another reaction video with your boy Big Baby. I'm in here today. We're going to be reacting to another Jubilee video. We love doing these. This one is Should Minors Transition? Detransition versus Trans. This is a middle ground. We're part of the middle ground series with I almost said Vice Jubilee. So definitely check it out. Check out Jubilee. They have great content, great discussions. I'm going to approach this with an open mind. Maybe make some jokes I shouldn't, but I'm going to approach it with an open mind and try to understand every perspective as much as possible. I mean, I really love this series because of that. There are times when you get some really honest conversations with very open-minded people that I think result in some really beautiful and necessary dialogue. So often I think these conversations get politicized to the point to where they're so polarizing that you can't really have a nuanced take on it. So I'm really interested to see what these people who are impacted one way or another by this problem and, see what they have to say about it. Without any further ado, like, share, subscribe, show some love. You want to get involved in some interesting conversations, explore the internet with Big Baby, as well as watch some podcasts that I produce and, just all kinds of stuff, all kinds of conversations, sports, current events, just societal topics, all that. We get into it here. Like, share, subscribe. Big Baby. Without any further ado, this is Detransition Peoples versus Trans people in the conversation. Should minors transition? I'm sure there's going to be many more conversations. That's just the one highlighted. So let's go.
Raise your hand if you feel attacked by the opposite side.
Transition.
Step forward if you agree with the prompt.
Hey, yo, she was stepping forward.
Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors. I repeat, gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
So the transitioners across
Medical
the board.
transition is no place for a child. I transition as an adult, and I have medical complications.
I hope somebody asked what they were originally. I'm not trying to be a dickhead right off the bat, but
I have mental health issues. Child cannot consent to a medical transition because kids want to eat ice cream every day. It doesn't mean that they should.
I kind of agree with you on that as well, because we have so many rules and regulations when it comes to tobacco or alcohol or any type of drugs. Driving a car, you can't even rent a motel until you're like 25. There's some specific things that we need to put into place that I think would help protect our children, because the minors themselves really don't know who they are until they become 25, 26 years old. Their minds aren't fully developed, and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
So I did transition as a minor. I was a teenager who had a lot of mental health issues and had been sexually exploited and hated my body. And it ended with me kind of finding spaces where that was twisted into, no, you're just a boy in the wrong body. And it ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16, before any hormones, before anything else. And because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months.
Jubilee, come on, man. You got to let us know what mastectomy and shit like that means. But
I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me. I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child. The evidence we have suggests that the best way to figure out if gender dysphoria persists into adulthood is to let them grow up. Because a lot of these kids will grow out of it, and many of them will just grow up and end up being gay or gender nonconforming.
Yep.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
So before we get too far into that, I think all of those were really well put. They have more of a leg to stand on this conversation than I do, obviously, as people who have transitioned and transitioned back. But I think they make very poignant, common sense points where something like this, medical surgeries in general, you shouldn't allow a child to consent to those, in my own personal opinion. I'm going to hear the other side's point with open ears, but just so you guys know where I stand, I don't think that's a stretch. Many things, you wouldn't let a kid, if a kid felt like their nose wasn't pleasing to them, you wouldn't allow them to elect without parental consent and all that to go get nose reconstructive surgery. You know what I mean? If it's not necessary, this is not medically necessary. So, I'll be interested to hear their argument for that, and hopefully we get some good pushback. But just so I can, be honest and upfront about my own perspective, I'm very hesitant.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say it's safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same scientists...
I have 10 studies that I can bring to you right now.
The same scientists that brought that up have since rolled it back and said it was never supposed to be applied the way it has. The American medical industry, we all know, is money hungry and has gone off the rails.
I do agree that there are definitely some doctors out there that may be taking advantage of trans people, and I'm sorry that you went through this. Truly, I really am sorry. But trans kids are valid, and it's not a decision that they're making.
What's your testosterone
It's
like
healthcare.
right now? You're very
I want to
aggressive
speak to that
with your
real
argument.
quick. Like, I came out 13 years ago when I was 14, and I knew, not that I was trans, but that I was a boy. I had to go through a lengthy process of therapy and seeing an endocrinologist and go through different tests and exams to make sure that this was real to everyone else involved. Transitioning and being trans was just a process I went through to become who I always knew I was. It wasn't a decision that I made. It was a life or death thing for me. And if I hadn't gotten on hormones and gotten surgery at 16, I don't know if I would be here.
As a father,
I'm curious. We're listening to everybody's story, obviously, but I wonder what makes you draw that. That's a very extreme conclusion to come to based off hypotheticals. If I wouldn't have got this, if this one thing wasn't different, I think what they're alluding to is that they may have killed themselves, because that's a common argument that's brought up in this scenario within the trans argument. Specifically, the gender-affirming surgery for minors is the suicide argument. But I think that anybody that's arguing that minors shouldn't transition, they're not opposed, or they're not. I'm not gonna say anybody, but for the most part, people are not opposed to treating those, possibly the body dysmorphia that exists, and just really hammering that out and making sure that there's not other less severe and final treatment that you have to undergo. Gender affirming surgery. That's a huge step. So let's hear what Lucky has to say.
I have 4 kids, and also as a trans person, I think that knowing what it looked like for me as a child, and that experience of going through all of the turmoil and all of the trepidation around my gender identity, I would not put my children in that situation. And also, I don't think that surgeries should be allowed for minors. When we look at the data and we look at the statistics and we look at the research, the vast majority of these surgeries are happening to adults. They're not minors. Yeah. So let's start there, right? And then further than that, if we look at puberty blockers are reversible. So when it comes to children, when we talk about puberty blockers, that gives them a shot.
Yeah.
And it gives them autonomy over their bodies. It gives them a space that they can explore their expression. They can explore who they are without surgeries, without all of these other things that could have permanent effects. Yeah. My kids were maybe 8 and 10 when I started my transition. And so I talked to them in kid terms. I told my son, I said, look, your mom, dad wants to be a dad because that's how I feel. And my kids being so young, they understood it. They were like, okay, we're with it, And so as they got older, I would bring them into my world and get them to understand the things that maybe I was going through. But now that they're adults, they understand differences in people, not just trans people, but people in general.
So there is such thing as gender fluid. How
Yes.
do you know that this kid is not going to change their gender expression later on? We really actually don't have studies on children that are taken over long term, like over 10 years, 20 years. You've only been on testosterone 14 years. One of the oldest trans men, Buck Angel, he almost died from testosterone. You're saying right now it saved your life. You may still die from it. You don't know. You're
die
still
happy.
Exactly.
You'll die
adult,
for
you can
ideology,
make
and a
that
lot of people
decision.
have died for an ideology.
It's not an
But
ideology.
we have
It
more
is.
people that are
Who I am.
dying because
It's an
they're not
idea that you were
allowed
born
to
in the wrong
express
body.
themselves. Look,
So 100% it's an ideology, which is fine because we all have ideology that we subscribe to. It doesn't mean that it's immediately false. But I mean, I think some of the things that make this kind of a more of an insidious idea is the kind of like ownership that individuals take over, where this person's like, it's not an ideology, it's me, it's my identity, or whatever, whatever he said. You know, I think that's kind of like the Trojan horse and part of the danger behind it, to be honest. Let's hear Lucky.
the suicide rate of transmasculine folks is at 55%, and one of the factors that could save.
I wonder why they specified trans masculine. What do those numbers look like for trans feminine? I don't know. I'm curious about that.
Their lives is support, right? And so if we have folks that are committing suicide because they're not allowed to transition, how do we fix that? If you're telling me the
So pushback to this person immediately is you're taking one potential cause of this person's decision, and then you're highlighting it and blowing it up as if it's the only variable, when in reality anybody that's dealing with confusion when it comes to their identity, there may be many other things that are contributing to a unhealthy mindset that may lead to them unfortunately taking their own lives. That's tragic, and that is something I've heard. And violence done onto trans from other people I've heard is high, very high. So, you know, I think there's definitely issues to address there. But
for children or minors is something that shouldn't be done.
I am very sensitive to this subject, as I've been the person who has had to talk people off the ledge when it comes to suicidality. The discussion around how we talk about suicide is a very dangerous one in this community. You know, my parents were told, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? That's not an appropriate way to talk about that.
And I understand that, but it is our transmasculine youth
I understand
that are at the highest.
Yeah,
I understand that, and they deserve.
Address that. Don't just make, once again, like trying to bring it back to, like, this person is exposing you to another perspective, which I think is fair. I think they're kind of, and this was I was kind of alluding to earlier, is in some cases it feels like the people that have this ideology, they've almost like weaponized suicide. And people committing suicide and self-harm, they've weaponized it as if, have them do, let them do this, and then that's going to prevent all that from happening. Like, that's the obvious answer. Well, it's not the obvious answer. It's not that simple. It's most times not. I'm curious if anybody's going to talk about it. I'm curious to find the numbers myself, what the suicide, my bad, don't fuck me on that, or me saying fuck algorithm, please. But, I wonder what the numbers are for trans people that have transitioned. Because, I mean, I'm sure there's complications that come with that life. And once again, just because you change your sex to affirm what you feel like, I don't think that automatically is going to make all your other problems fall away. You still are now just going to be the opposite sex dealing with, I can't pay my rent, I can't hold down a consistent job, I can't whatever, you know?
Help, but we also need to have a responsible conversation that is not using suicide as a means to push them down a pipeline before they have that comprehensive care.
So I have a question.
So, Reese, I know you've been wanting to say something.
Yeah, no, because I have a big problem. Oh, yeah, no, so I'm not an interrupter. What I'm going to say is we insult children, our youth, so much by taking away their autonomy and their own agency over their own decisions and insulting that they know who they are. Like, an adult knows who they are more than they do. No one knows who I am more than I do.
Right.
And it's always been that way. I've always known who I was. I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I just had to adjust my.
I am a little bit of an interrupter, although I'm listening to what this person said, but I want to respond to it. The first part, and the good thing is we have a pause button here. These guys don't, so they just got to let each person get their diatribe off and be kind. The point isn't that I know who you are more than what you do. It's just that I may not know who you are 100% right now, the ins and outs, 100% what your identity is, but neither do you. There's a process that we all have to be honest about as far as just learning ourselves, filling ourselves out. Like, I'm not the person I was when I was 13, for example, you know, not even close.
Body. And so I think taking away kids' agency and the right to their own body is, it's anti-human.
I have a question. Do you believe
Disagree.
minors should be able to get tattoos or plastic surgery or consent to the list of other?
so different.
Hold on.
I understand they are different things, but to what
No, you
level
can't
do
even
we?
make that
No.
How is tattoos different? That's actually least like that's less serious. You feel me?
To what level do we give children bodily autonomy
Luca's cooking
over
right now.
everything they do? Because here's the thing, children need
Luca,
barriers
Dom's
in childhood
cooking as well.
development. You need barriers, and they need a safe way to push against those barriers. And I worry with the current medical system that instead of giving them a safe way to express themselves and push against barriers, we have taken some of those barriers away. And that is why you see more detransitioners, because those barriers have been lifted.
Yeah, they're not just doling out surgeries for children. That's not happening
I had a
anywhere.
letter from a therapist in a single visit at the gender clinic office
And
before
that
I
was
had
abuse
the first.
from that therapist who did
Yeah,
not
that-
Yeah, that's
psychoanalyze
awful.
the
That
rest of
shouldn't
your
be
issues.
happening.
Right, and that shouldn't have happened.
But that happens. That's what the conversation about. That's what you're addressing. Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors. What the fuck are we talking about?
Your issues weren't being trans. There were a lot of other issues that you're
I have a
addressing right
diagnosis
now.
of gender dysphoria as
And
well.
you shouldn't. You were misdiagnosed.
No, I have one.
Right.
Yeah, you had to get a second opinion, honey.
Right.
And how was
Can
I,
I-
how was I
50.
supposed to do that when my parents were told
That's
that I
not
would
your
kill
fault.
myself?
But your
Yeah, that's not your
parents,
fault.
your parents,
Their biggest crime in all this was trusting a medical system that they thought would help me, and the professionals apparently not doing the right thing here.
I understand, but your
Yeah,
parents were
absolutely
responsible for the decisions that were made on your behalf.
I think that what this really highlights is the importance of you sharing your story, because what it shows is that you can't jump into these transitions, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't listen to these doctors that push you to transition just
Nobody
because you're feeling a
should.
certain way.
Social media brainwashes teens to believe that they're trans.
I have to agree on that one. Like, there's this thing about it, right? Like, yeah, there's this play that they have.
I don't think that it
person
necessarily
White shirt, I've
brainwashes
never
children,
even
but
seen.
I think there are a lot of people who get into being queer or trans because it's trendy. And I know that's a really controversial statement to make as a trans person, but I have seen it, I have experienced it, and I also find that social media, especially apps like TikTok, give a lot of these kids so much misinformation
Yes.
and lead to people thinking they're trans when there are much deeper issues, and everyone just wants to belong and find an identity, especially when they're young. You know?
I think brainwash is such a
Yeah, to a certain extent, you know, it, like kind of like what he's saying, it is like those. I used to see these Facebook posts all the time where they were literally just there so they could get shared as many times to be like, if you're a badass, then you're gang Leo, Virgo, Capricorn, fucking basically name like 10 of the 12 astrological signs and be like, it's something like, you're part of the cool crew, or you're a leader if you're one of these 10 out of 12. So it applies to like 80% of the fucking population. So yeah, stuff like that. Like, do you feel alone? Do you sometimes feel like you're not in the right body? Do you sometimes not feel like yourself? Yeah, like that kind of shit is
a strong
Yeah, that's a
word to
very
use
aggressive
there
word. I
when
would
it's
not. That's why I hesitated to step forward.
And that's why I
yeah.
would step in and actually say it's more so of like a social contagion.
Just, yeah.
What got me to transition in the first place was social media. It had a grasp on me that there could be something else out in the world for me during that discovery, and I played it to the fullest 100%. I even passed as a female for a good, what was it, 6 years out of the 7 that I was transitioned. And later down the road, I went and paid out of pocket and talked to just a regular therapist, and she made me start questioning my own existence in a way, what I can do as a human being, not just as a male or a female, but what can I contribute to the society. And it made me open up to maybe I was born as a male, and it feels empowering to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was heavy on social media. Like in my transition, Tumblr, that was the place to be for sure. And everyone was talking about their transition from my experience, and everyone was talking about a lot of mental health issues, depression, and all of that, and it was kind of being trendy in that sense. Like when TikTok came out, like that was like a whole nother world. And the biggest thing that I found with that is like they weren't saying a lot of the negative things that were happening in their transition. There was always like a positive outlook on it, like I'm being who I need to be, like this is great.
This is the ticket to your happiness.
Yeah, and
how it's sold.
like so much on social media. Like I made a documentary on my transition, and I really went into depth of like a lot of my depression that I dealt with on that, and I didn't find anyone talking about that.
I personally didn't think I was trans till I saw earlier trans YouTubers. Before I was just gender bending man. And for sure, I also feel like comparing yourself on social media to other people that are more beautiful.
This person's name being Shape is fucking amazing.
Successful will create dysphoria of some kind.
Yeah,
and some people,
it will affect your self-image for sure.
Because we see all those beautiful trans women that are all dolled up or had every possible plastic surgery they could ever get. You're gonna feel dysphoria. You're gonna be like, I don't look like that.
I mean, that's
so I
in
have to go
general,
through
though.
steps.
You know what I mean? Whether you're cis
Right.
or trans, everyone
So social media has
is dealing with
such a-
that
I've fallen
for
into
sure.
that.
It has
looking
such
at,
a bad impact on
actors
mental
and stuff.
health.
I wanted to be that muscular dude, and I wanted to do
100%.
that. So
No,
yeah,
it is such a bad,
exist.
like well-documented bad impact on people's like sense
Right.
of like sense of self and mental health, and so.
But I also really quickly just want to say, like, I don't want people to think that, like, social media is turning people trans.
Yeah, we agree with that.
All right, can the disagree step forward?
Yeah. So if you're thinking of trans as a identity outside of the procedures and things like that, but because of that social contagion or however you want to put it, it is enabling people that otherwise maybe could use other medical help. It's allowing them. Well, I mean, it's tricking them into thinking, like you said, like it's a quick fix. You know. So I think that should be acknowledged here.
Yeah, okay, so my thoughts on social media and everyone suddenly looking or being trans. I think whoever is leaning towards that or looking towards being trans for answers was always someone that felt that way or felt some type of way about their gender or their identity or the way they present themselves.
Disagree.
They're just going to go that way. I know plenty of femme twinks who went the muscle queen pipeline. It's not a rare occurrence. And so just experience your life, have fun. Try not to take social media seriously because no one is advertising their failures. It's all fake.
Yeah, but I think it is also important to say that like social media is very, very effective. I mean, I personally scroll on TikTok and I'm like, do I have OCD? Do I have autism? Like all these different things. And like it can suck you in. So it's important to be aware of those things.
I have a question for Samantha, since you have the largest platform here. Do you believe over the years you've inspired people to transition?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that I've inspired people to believe that it's okay to be transgender, it's okay to express themselves, and that it's possible to live a happy and successful life.
How do you feel about the fact that some of them are going to regret the body modifications they got and going to have
I think that they should go to a doctor that is well-versed in gender care and have the appropriate psychoanalytic analysis done beforehand. That's not my problem.
I feel like a lot of folks are going to social media looking for possibility models. They're looking to see if they're okay. I know for me,
She snapped, and that's not my problem, is what she said.
I was very young, looking to see if there were other people like me, because for a long time I thought that I was
the only one.
Exactly.
I thought I was the
right.
only one.
And so feeling like that, like suicide was a thing for me.
Me too.
Right. And so when I did see a possibility model, when I did see somebody that looked like me, that put me in a space where I was like, I'm okay.
Sigh of relief.
Right.
I will say there's also a difference from like showing people that you can have a positive life and then telling them what to do. So I think you on your channel are kind of like, hey, look what I was able to do and how this made me feel, versus like, you should do this because I did this.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
I
I'm
think,
also, I try my best to be very upfront
right,
about the
because we
issues of
can't help if
transition.
someone's
Exactly.
going to change their mind on something. Like that's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're humans.
And I have to jump on one more thing with that. Like, if I'm watching her channel and it inspires me to transition, I have been watching white straight men be president for years, and I've not wanted to be president once. So I don't identify with that. If we're going to talk about brainwashing, let's talk about where we see things.
Obviously, when we're talking about that, we're talking about people that are already vulnerable and already susceptible. So to make a fucking ridiculous correlation between somebody who's transitioned, sharing that experience, something that's very obtainable. You go to the doctor. There's way more commitment. I'm quite sure you're most likely not qualified to be president of the United States.
every single day happening a certain way versus someone just living their life
Bullshit
authentically.
argument. Garbage.
People with gender dysphoria need therapy, not surgery.
It's facts. Y'all are wild.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that one.
I don't.
Convinced.
What's there even to think about?
I think
It's potentially both, though.
Yeah.
I think everyone with gender dysphoria needs to go through a therapeutic process and mental health care before they make that choice for themselves.
Exactly.
I personally confused a lot of my gender dysphoria for body dysmorphia.
I'm curious if these people, and I wonder what you guys think. Leave comments, obviously, on any of this. But I wonder if. So he's like, everybody, it needs to be handled however that person decides. Is there a scenario in which a person should be barred from electing this surgery for themselves? I mean, we don't allow people to. I mean, this is extreme because it's across the board ban, but I'm saying, like, there's things we don't allow people to do. Smoke meth. You know, I mean, we don't co-sign that. Now, I'm not trying to necessarily make that comparison there after I said the one lady made a crazy comparison. But, I mean, I'm coming off the cuff here, so I'm trying to find a good comparison. But there's things that we don't allow people to do. And after the therapy process, if we do determine that somebody is not of a sound state of mind, is it a reasonable conclusion to come to just say, you are not allowed to have this surgery? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how.
No matter how much I feminize my body, so today I still don't feel comfortable in my own body. And now, like, looking among like members of trans community, I see that people keep on getting more and more surgeries. The surgeries are no longer affirming. You can just tell that this person is like struggling with body images. I was able to get on estrogen pretty quickly when I was 22, and my mental health declined afterwards, and I attributed it to being still in the wrong body, needing more body modification. I ended up getting sex reassignment surgery. I do believe that transition was sold to me as a hardware fix for my mental issues that were not addressed. I still struggle with internalized homophobia that pushed me into transition in the first place. I struggle with borderline personality disorder, body dysmorphia. I'm on a spectrum, and I'm ADHD, and I have all those issues that were not helped, and I was still struggling with them after transition, and I still do. Overall, after a few years, I came to a conclusion that I was not in the wrong body, that I'm a gender non-conforming man, and I am a feminine man. That's what I am.
I don't know if you guys have heard, but I've had a lot of binary trans people say that it's not a mental health issue. Like, if you're trans, and I know I don't agree with that. Like, I think there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. I guess I'm asking that. Like, it's like, do you think that it's a mental health disorder? And
I don't
needs to
think
have
being
therapy?
transgender is a mental health disorder.
Right.
I think, you know, gender incongruence is what they're referring to it as now. It's listed as a sexual health concern, but the gender dysphoria, which is the symptom that arises when you are transgender, is a mental health concern.
So maybe I'm thinking of, like, that's what I'm trying to say then in a sense.
And then once you are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and I feel like this is kind of what the prompt is kind of hinting at, if you do have gender dysphoria, the only treatment for that is transition.
Right.
Whether that be just a social transition, a medical transition, whatever transition fits you, that is the only way to heal your gender dysphoria. When I transitioned, the first thing
I want to hear what she has to say, but I also am curious about, so there's many, when you say cure, I guess because you're affirming that, so therefore now you no longer have dysmorphia because you are what you believe that you are. But there's plenty of, like, schizophrenia, for example. Schizophrenia we would treat. We're not gonna, you know, affirm the schizophrenic mindset, so therefore, you know, it's correct. You know what I mean? We're not gonna, your family's not gonna dress up as fucking bunny rabbits and tell you to go murder, kill, just so what you're hearing in your mind and what the world is presenting is matching up. So I'm curious if, I'm curious in the point that she's trying to make. If that's the point that she's trying to make, well, then I disagree for that reason.
my mom said to me was, can't you just be gay? It hurt hearing that, but a big reason that she said that was she was afraid of what my dad would think. He's always been very, very conservative, very traditional, you could say. He would make comments about trans people, about gay people growing up, so I always knew that he wasn't necessarily accepting. So when it came down to me transitioning, I said to him, I'm going to do this. Either you're going to be the dad that accepts me and supports me through it, or like, goodbye. And he chose to support me, and we're closer than ever now.
And I think a lot of us go through medical transitions to easier go through social transition.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so a lot of our folks that do transition, and may detransition. Both experiences are valid, but also understanding that we're not mentally ill because we're trans,
Yes.
right? And I think that there should be a psychiatrist or someone within behavioral health to be able to say, okay, you're in the right frame of mind to make this decision. But I want to just make it very clear that trans people are not dealing with mental health because they're trans.
Absolutely.
I disagree. I feel like transgender is definitely, and elderly trans people afford for it to be classified as mental illness, so it's covered by insurance. Otherwise, why are you getting the surgeries to?
Because
if it's not a
dysphoria.
medical condition?
The dysphoria is a medical condition.
It is, but it's in your head. I would say that you have some kind of mental disorder if you're trying to mimic a stereotype of opposite sex. to
Right, but
pass
it's
in
not a
society.
mimic. It's
The treatment for this
aligning.
mental illness is to transition.
I have a question though,
Yeah.
because I have a gender dysphoria diagnosis. I always have. But I'm still where I am today.
This motherfucker right here is just fucking dropping his pussy on the table because, by the way, I just flipped. Usually be dropping. It sounded weird saying pussy on the table. Usually say dropping your dick, but being respectful here. So yeah, no, just tossing around that dysmorphia. I want to know, like, basically, Luca's trying to figure out. Do y'all have your paperwork in order? Because I think maybe I should be the only one even talking about this shit.
Can I give you my honest opinion? I think that you were probably misdiagnosed.
I don't think I was.
So you
Do you
do
feel
have gender
dysphoria in your body?
I certainly do now.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I think because of the
you
change that
want
made.
to talk about now, but at the time,
At the time,
at the time, I genuinely believed I did. I thought it would save me. And then looking back, I realized that my dysphoria stemmed from some severe trauma that was not handled.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why I think that mental health step is so important.
Yeah,
Because I've heard this from several other, mostly female detransitioners who we had some form of pretty bad trauma that spawned gender dysphoria symptoms.
Yeah.
And we can disagree about misdiagnosis or something later, but it felt real at the time for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it did. I didn't mean that.
And no, I know. And it's one of those things where
the thing
that
is, like, from either side, they're gonna tiptoe around any of that because it all kind of like feeds back into one another's point of view. It's all
that's
about
where the mental health
validation.
treatment really needs to come in and get to the root of that issue, because oftentimes, specifically with the detransitioners I've talked to, that was ignored. I came out to my parents in a mental health facility after telling the therapist that I thought I was transgender. And she told me we had to tell your parents so that way you can get the help you need. It led to me seeing a gender therapist who, honestly, the issues I was facing were never addressed. To this day, no one ever addressed the fact that I had severe trauma and exploitation going on as a young teenager. Instead, I was kind of just affirmed in, you believe this, and instead of even just a little pushback.
It's almost like when you see like police interviews and their interrogations and stuff like that. It's almost like we're not really in this to find the person. We just want to find a diagnosis, or we want to find something that we could stamp you with so we can keep this moving, or we can keep this fucking money system. Left hand watches the right hand, watches the back of the head. You know what I mean? Like, they touched on it earlier. I mean, at the end of the day, in America specifically, this is a capitalist society, and our medical system is not, it's not immune to that. One of the only countries in the world that has pharmaceutical commercials on the television. So for sure, our medical system is not above making money and exploiting people. So I think that's an important story, and an interesting one for Luca and these other folks to share.
It led me to the point where the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy at 16. A few months after that, I started testosterone because it was the next step of what I was supposed to do.
God intended for there to be only two genders.
My dog stepped up, brave.
Odor is unavoidable. Eliminating it is easy with OxyClean Odor Blasters.
My thing here is honestly, irrelevant question is what I would think. Like, did God intend? I don't know. It's a philosophical question, I guess, we can get into, but
Okay, you go first.
Okay, so as a Christian, I truly believe that God created male and female, and He created that throughout life, throughout the nature, throughout the wildlife, throughout Earth itself. And then the arguments come up into the ocean sides of, well, there's these asexual creatures and stuff like that. Well, they were designed that way for a reason, and we humans were not designed to. We were designed to procreate and be able to bring life back to the earth, because we live and we die, we live and we die. It's a rotation of a process of life in itself, and it's its own journey. So I truly do believe that there is male and there is female, but I can respect people's choices. However, that's where I stand on it.
Outliers.
Well, I'm not Christian, but I do believe there's only two biological sexes, and somehow that's how it's been designed, whether it's by higher power or by evolution. I do believe gender expression has been on a spectrum for centuries. So we do have references to people who've been cross-dressing. We have references to eunuchs. And as somebody who went through transition and detransition, when I started taking testosterone, it's almost like reminded me of my original blueprint. And I feel like I went against my original blueprint and I did a lot of damage to it, and I just cannot go back to who I was, because without my testicles, I'm just too far gone in my transition. So that's where I'm at.
Can the disagree step forward?
Real as fuck.
Yeah, we have historically spent more time.
So one, I think the question's not out of bounds. I guess it's interesting, but when we're talking about things like it's interesting to see the spectrum of people's ideologies, but I do kind of feel like when we're talking about should minors, this was the original question, should minors transition and stuff like that, we're talking about laws, what kind of treatment should take place. I think this kind of question gets us away from that,
Focusing on and celebrating several genders. There are several different cultures throughout the world that celebrate the different genders, and to negate the fact that they exist and to negate their validity is just wrong.
There are as many intersex people as there are redheaded people on the planet. I can name 12 people at the top of my head who are born intersex. So to pretend like there's man and woman is just erasing an entire group of people. The God you speak of, the first God that intersex people get to meet, is the doctor, because it's up to their discretion of just what you're going to be when they mutilate their body to be a man or a woman, and that is not fair.
Yeah. Right.
Right, and I think also gender and male and female is not the same thing.
Biological sex are different things.
Yeah, we're talking about gender, which is like gender identity, the social aspects to being a man or a woman. But male and female dictate sex, so like body parts.
I disagree with having sex and gender being two different things.
Okay,
I believe them to
fact.
be one. So I believe that they're the same. They're one and the same. They're not different, but we have evolutionary problems within the humanity, because I also see it.
Real quick, so I think that this is an argument that I can get behind to a certain extent in both ways. I see what he's saying as far as like they do inform one another, obviously, because when you're first born, your sex is male, so everybody's going to socially assign that same gender that applies, right? So, I think to throw that out entirely is kind of silly, but that's what I can get more behind when we're talking about, more than one gender. I could definitely see a scenario where science has brought us to a point, just like science may bring us to a point where at some point we have unorganic human beings, to be honest. I mean, not to like conflate the two and make it a ridiculous conversation, but I mean, genuinely, I think we have to acknowledge science and where it's brought us. And now it's brought us where people can alter their sex or can alter their gender, whatever, let's not get caught up in the terminology. But I think as a society, we can progress with that. Now, we should make sure that people are doing it, I think, responsibly and things of that matter. But I think we can progress with what science has, and we can make the distinction now of what a biological man and then what a trans man is. You know what I mean? Those are two different things, two sides of the same coin, whatever. And the same thing where there's biological women and then there's trans women. I don't think there's any issue with seeing those people and acknowledging them in that way. So.
That there are intersex animals that do exist, and that's how they're born. But I also do believe that the initial design was for man and woman, and then somewhere along the way, viruses, mutations, diseases, plagues, all that type of stuff that we have in the world does play a part back onto the world itself. But I believe the initial intent was for God to create Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. I'm just going to say it.
That's homophobic.
I know it sounds homophobic, and I understand.
No,
I'm
it is
homophobic.
That's okay.
Homophobia made me transition, and that's what you're perpetuating right now. I grew up in a very homophobic family, and since I was a kid, I was always brainwashed, said gay is bad. My parents were not happy that I was naturally feminine. They always tried to make me more masculine. They tried to give me to masculine sports. I was mercilessly bullied at school for my femininity, constantly being told that I'm not a real man, that I'm a sissy. And when I came out to my parents as gay, they took me to therapists and tried to do pretty much conversion therapy on me, which failed.
So I don't believe in God. I believe in people that exist right in front of me, and I believe they should have the right to exist. And so
I'm not saying they don't have the right to exist. I'm just saying that was the
they weren't
initial
mistakes
intent.
either. They're just here the way you and I are here right now, and they are who they are, and we have to accept people as they are.
Right, and there are biological differences in trans folks when we look at the brainstem. You know, our brainstems are different. Like
Neurologically.
Right, neurologically, we're different.
Yeah, male and female are different, exactly.
Trans people are different.
Yes.
They've found a distinct difference in the cortex.
There is no biomarker for trans. Some brain scan of some gay males is identical to female brain, but there is no biomarker for trans. Please don't spread misinformation.
There is science that hints towards it. It's just not confirmed.
No, there's research.
So therefore, it falls under the belief that there is, but there's no scientific fact to back that up. Which therefore, I believe that God's initial intent was to create male and female.
If God intended to, if God exists and in the way that you believe, and just intended to make male and female, then we wouldn't be sitting here. I believe
intersex people would
completely disagree with that. That is a non-point. The reason you're sitting there is because science has nothing to do with the God concept. Once again, which is why I kind of felt like this prompt was a stupid prompt anyways. The reason you're sitting there is because science has advanced far enough to cosmetically change your sex to the point to where you present as a man. So that's why you're sitting there like that. It's not, God didn't make you that way. Like, let's just be clear.
In a higher power, right, of my own. And God is not this thing that creates rules and binary situations and laws that can be broken or really made. We're just all here.
Yeah.
You know, like I was born in a female body, but I was never a girl. Never. Ever. Ever. I can't explain why, but that is my truth. That is the fact. That is who I've always been. And there's no way that I'm gonna look up at this guy at some guide and be like, oh yeah, you made me as a mistake.
Right.
Transitioning improved my sex life.
Okay, one of the detransitions walked up. That's interesting.
Who wants to start?
I could start.
And I'm embarrassed.
The detransitioner is like, I was getting too much sex. I had to go back.
Not to say that my sex life was bad before, but I think transitioning and coming into my body and feeling comfortable in my skin allowed me to open up more and allowed me to not only be better in bed, but also explore what my sexuality looks like.
Yeah.
Being trans also like made sex really complicated for me too, because I'm a straight guy and I pass very well, and majority of the women that I've been with, I would have to eventually kind of like break it to them that I was trans and deal with a lot of rejection. And with somebody, I would never let girls touch me or see me without clothes on. Not having a penis made me feel inferior as a man, and that no one would want me, which is why I like rejected that part of myself and never even let it be loved. It took a lot of really accepting that people were going to accept me and be attracted to me and love me and want to give me pleasure regardless of what was in my pants. And that took a long time. It took until I was like, I think I was 21, when my ex girlfriend and I started dating. From that point on, I realized that just letting someone love me was half the battle. And once I let that piece come into play, I mean, it changed my life.
Do you want to go? You want to go?
Y'all can go. I'll go last.
I mean, so even though I detransitioned, in the beginning, especially when I was on hormones, like it increased my sex drive a lot, and there were a lot of aspects to that was like enjoyable to explore my fluidity for sure. I was able to date a lot of people, and I think like from detransitioning, it's like the opposite of that. Like my sex drive completely changed in a way that like there's good aspects to not being horny 24/7. It helped me be more comfortable in my body, even with detransitioning, which sounds weird, but like having a trans male body was like so different from the norm. So like I had to accept certain parts of myself. So like even with detransitioning, it helps me accept like certain parts of myself that I don't have still.
Absolutely.
I did identify as a gay man before I transitioned. And like those relationships, I feel like I always kind of had like out of body experiences when we were like intimate. And even after I transitioned, before I had bottom surgery, I like, just like the anxiety and the dysphoria that I would feel whenever I was intimate or like a partner would try to be intimate with me was just like crippling.
Yeah.
So then when I had surgery and I felt more affirmed in my body and, you know, it feels right to me now, I'm finally able to have those intimate connections with people and, you know, form those deeper bonds. So it's really helped me a lot.
I'm so happy for you. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
When I came out as trans when I was 18, I moved to Miami, and it wasn't until I got my gender-affirming surgeries where I was where I did like lose my virginity, because I was just not comfortable doing that. I was like, I'm not presenting in my best light, and I think I could get there.
Yeah, for me it was like I'm not fitting the role that I'm supposed to play in this relationship.
It felt weird,
absolutely.
and you also attract a different type of partner. Back in my day, I used to attract what we call a chaser. Versus someone who was genuinely attracted to the female form, which is someone who I wanted to, like, that's the role I felt. And so that's where I was comfortable. And now I'm comfortable. In Virginia, the T word did not exist. That was on Jerry Springer and Maury Povich, and that's where that stayed. No one was trans. And so I transitioned when I was about 18. I moved to Miami, and my joke is that I hit the tarmac and I said, I'm a woman, by the way. I remember I came out to my mom, and I was super nervous because I'd come out as gay years and years before, because that was so much easier. But when I came out, I remember my mom just asked if I was happy, if I was healthy, and if I was gonna finish school, because she had already paid for it. And I said yes.
Can the disagree a
well,
step forward?
She didn't address that there, but I wonder if when they came out, if they knew at that time that they were trans, you know what I mean? Or if they felt as if they were gay.
Transition definitely ruined my sex life. I was fine with my penis, but a year after estrogen, I felt like that part didn't belong on me anymore. So I went ahead and had sex reassignment surgery. After that, my sex drive was gone pretty much. I kept on having complications. I wasn't able to keep my neovagina open despite rigorous dilation. I had multiple revisions, including colon vaginoplasty. I just got some of my sex drive back last year when I started detransitioning with testosterone, but it's kind of traumatic to have male sex drive back without my penis. Also, I want to say that sexuality is fluid. My sexuality has definitely changed once I lost my testosterone. Before, I was strictly attracted to men. After I lost my testosterone, I was attracted to people in general, because now I didn't have this like male sex drive, so I couldn't relate to men as much. You know, they wanted to have sex, but I just wanted to hold hands and cuddle. And now my body dysmorphia / actual gender dysphoria as well is worse than ever before. I do feel like I'm stuck in a surgically created body. I just don't think I've been really myself by trying to become a woman. Yeah, so transition did take a lot from me.
Must be really, really hard. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
If you had like found the results that you desired in the beginning, would you feel differently than you do now?
No, because I realized I just miss being a man, you know, I just miss being obsessed about sex and money. I don't want to do the whole emotional thing. And I'm talking about stereotypes, okay? So I regret it's just like now I'm a medical patient for life. Also having sex drive back, it just reminds me that I lost all these years. I could have been having fun, whether it's chasers or I definitely have internalized homophobia. So internalized homophobia also pushed me into transition because I felt like chasers weren't good enough because I wanted to be a woman. I wanted to escape my homosexuality. But now I realize at the end of the day, I'm a gay man and I'm still living with internalized homophobia because therapists actually never helped me with that.
It's fascinating that you say that because I dated men and women, and in my transition, I felt like I had an internalized homophobia when I was with men because I didn't feel like a gay man. And that was really hard for me to like figure out because I had had this journey for so long, and a lot of sexual experiences were good, but I was on Grindr and I'm sleeping with these men and they're treating me how I would want to be treated in a social setting, but I'm like, I was really, really masculine in my presentation, but I tended to be kind of feminine in my roles within sex. And so I think that also got me to realize that I wanted to detransition because it was a reflection of the relationships that I had. Like, to follow kind of some stereotypes, like I did miss being a woman in some of those like social settings, like with how women interacted with me, with how men interacted with me, like. So yeah, that's heavily relatable to that for sure. So I do not regret my transition. Shocking, I know. That was like a really great time for me in the beginning. I really was able to explore and express myself in ways that I could not have done without hormones and surgery. I learned so much about how people treat people based on gender and looks in general. I feel like I would not be the person, especially the confidence and security that I have within myself if I didn't transition as presenting as a woman in this world. My dynamic with men in general is so much different. I mean, I was very insecure, very submissive, very quiet, and now I'm able to speak up for myself because of that.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say, during my transition, I didn't actually have a high sex drive from the hormones, and ever since I came back, my sex drive has been higher ever since, and I think it's because I'm no longer on the estrogen. My testosterone levels are increased after I changed back to being who I was originally born as, and it also kind of opened up my eyes to say, maybe I wasn't really a female. This is probably what I would like my future spouse to have, to look upon it. And I'm proud that I actually have that sex drive back again because I felt like I lost it for a long time.
The LGBTQ plus community is not as accepting as they claim.
Oh, wow.
Damn.
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs?
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to agree. That is true information.
There's still so much transphobia within the LGBT people in the LGBT community that hasn't been addressed yet.
Shoot, there's transphobia within trans people.
Absolutely. When I was transitioning in high school, I searched for acceptance from the cis hetero world. And now I feel like I'm doing the opposite and searching for acceptance from my own community half the time. Like when I was in college, the queer community on my campus hated me because I did like heteronormative like guy stuff. I played lacrosse, I was in a frat, but like I wasn't that guy, I guess, that they had in their head. And every time I would go to the LGBT club meetings, I would get like they would stare into my soul like I was just this awful thing. And it's always just made me feel invisible and small in whatever space I'm in. And I find that just really disheartening.
And it happens in a lot of other cultures and communities as well too. So
it's funny that
just happens.
You mentioned like the transitioning in high school part and like that shift from, you know, searching for acceptance outside and then turning around and then having to search for acceptance within the community. Yeah. Because I did notice that when I was still living as a trans man, when I passed really well, all of a sudden it was like I wasn't welcome in these spaces anymore. Until they knew, and then you get that icky feeling of like you only want me here because of that. And you know now I have the detrans aspect where no community wants me, no one. Like I'm still part of the I'm part of the LGB part, but I've lost people that I thought they liked me for me, and it didn't matter what I was. Right. But then all of a sudden, detransitioning was the thing that I've been called a traitor
Yeah,
I've
sure.
been,
Me too.
you know, it's,
Me too.
they don't want me. The rest of the world doesn't want me.
That's not true. That's not true.
It can often
want you.
feel that way. It can
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
isolated.
But it
feels
feels
that
really
way.
isolating. Like, this is not a club.
It's not a
You know,
club.
and it's not like a personality trait that I'm just taking up. And God forbid one day I change my mind. I won't, but like, or something happens where I have to detransition. I would hope that the people who stood by my side through everything else would still be there for me because of who I am, period. And not because of an effing label over my head.
And even when I transitioned, I dealt.
Well, I think what Luca, the woman always to the left, is kind of touching on, and this is where I would agree as a not a member of the community, but somebody that just has observed it, and as far as not being accepting is, and I think this is what Luca was touching on, is not being accepting if you don't 100% buy in and align with the party line. Very much like a Republican and Democrat scenario, LGBT operates a lot like that. If you're not with, if you're not going to blindly support the entire agenda, then, you know, it feels as if a lot of that community would rather not have you around at all as an ally. So
with the traitor to everyone. It was, you know, oh, you want to be a man and the patriarchy. And I was like, I get it. But also, but what I found very interesting was like this divide between trans men and trans women. When I first started doing a lot of advocacy, I was told that just being in the space, that I was taking up too much room, that I was taking up too much space and don't speak and all of these things. And I was like, wait a minute, but I'm trans too, right? This community also belongs to us too. Right. So that was something that I grappled with for a while.
I hung out with a lot of gay women, and then when I transitioned, I definitely lost my space there, and that was like really hard for me to navigate because being shunned out of these female spaces for me was really hard and difficult.
Right now.
And then when I got to the trans male community, there was a lot of competition. Who looked the best, who passed the best, like that was very difficult.
Oh yeah.
Shoot, fortunately I had a full beard, so it was like an easy, like, you know what I mean? Like, but still, like I heavily resonate with trans men still, and I definitely resonate with trans women from detransitioning and gender non-conforming people. So it's like, where do I belong?
Weird position to be in
Yeah.
because it's like one community, like I said, doesn't really want you, but you don't fit in. You can't really go all the way back, so you don't fit in with the rest of them.
We just shouldn't have to categorize.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't have to float around, wonder where we belong. Like,
we have the other detransitioners, but even then,
that's normal
we're all
within
still
us.
vastly different
That's an us
individuals who
problem
have
as much as
vastly
it's a-
different life experience, political views, religious beliefs.
Right.
You know,
You're not just
experience how
different
we
with transition.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
that's no different
Experience how
with
we
the trans
talk
community, right?
good luck getting people
In some
not
ways,
to want
it's
to belong.
empowering because it feels like you're, even though all this happened, you're being seen as an individual for almost the first time after, you know, spending my high school years being lumped in by both the LGBT community and the rest of the people in a category.
Fire conversation.
But it's also very isolating because you
doing
don't
their thing.
have really that community support
Luca
that other places get.
cooking, coming from the heart.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you guys so
Fuck
much.
with all my
Yes, I
trans
do.
conversations in
Yes,
this
I do.
video. Mess with all y'all. Y'all were lion-hearted in this video. Big baby stamps you. I fuck with all y'all. Y'all did your thing. Like, share, subscribe, show some love. Be a part of more of these conversations. Let me know how you felt about this video. Jump in the comments. Let me know what else you want me to talk about. Send me some cool stuff to look at. You know what I mean? This could be a partnership. But either way, I really like that. I thought it was a really good conversation, interesting perspectives. You know, for me, you know, it didn't do much to. I pride myself actually being pretty fluid. I'm willing to see other opinions, and I want to update. You know what I mean? I want to update here. So, but in that situation, I didn't really find it overly compelling. The argument that the trans people were making for, I mean, the minors or anything of that nature. I definitely think getting the right care, the right therapy first is paramount, and then everything. I mean, it's your life, so at the end of the day, past that, how you want to go about resolving your issues and living your life out, that is up to you. But you know, when we have these conversations, we just might have an opinion on it, is really it. So I think people should be able to live their life however they want as adults is really my only stipulation there. I think a lot changes for kids. Definitely for me, a lot changed as I was growing up. And you just want to have a safe place for them to explore. You don't want them to explore and then they end up getting taken advantage of and exploited. They're exploring into exploitation. So we want to avoid that. And I think that's where a lot of the caution comes from for me. If you want to transition as an adult, I mean, I think definitely there's some risk involved. That's something that I think you should, if you have a support system, seek out their support and advice maybe, but do what makes you happy. But definitely, explore with caution, I think. It's a big thing, especially when you're talking about gender-affirming surgery and plastic surgery. Any of that's going to be a big deal. And specifically something like this, which could, irrevocably change whether you're able to have children and things of that nature. So, that's a huge, huge decision. So treat it with the respect it deserves. Everybody, thank you for tuning in with me today. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, show some love. Let's get to 500 subs and past. We've been growing a lot recently, and I really thank you guys for showing support. Anybody that's interested in these kind of conversations, make sure you share the podcast with them so we can build a cool community here that's open-minded and willing to engage in these types of conversations. This is fun for me, so I'm happy to bring this content for you guys. Thanks again. Like, share, subscribe, show some love. This is Jubilee. This is Sit and Politic, and your boy Big Baby. We'll see you next time.